Well, hello everyone, it's Brian again. Welcome to a new pen and paper chapter. I'm glad that I've covered most of my job careers, especially with the several gigs I've gone through. As of my last few uploads, I explained how I've landed a position at Best Buy, and for those that haven't heard my previous content, I've gone over briefly on some of the workings at Best Buy. And I may just recap my previous jobs as well. It might just benefit me by refreshing my memory a bit more. Yes, I already sound old. So far, the more uploads I've worked with, the more I've been able to journal and encapsulate my previous events. Now, speaking of my overall career, one of the major things that stuck with me for my previous jobs were metrics. So, here it goes. I don't think I have mentioned this, but Radio Shack wasn't my first job. Actually, my first job was at a restaurant, where I worked at the back in the kitchen. But it was a short term since it was a temporary job, to gather gas money while I was in college. But starting at Radio Shack and onwards to the rest of the jobs I've had, there's been few things in common: metrics, or a way to measure your performance and efficiency. I'm certain that you as the listener know what I'm referring to, and for those who aren't aware, it's a subject I wanted to bring up. Starting off at Radio Shack, I figured the job was to, simply sell as much as I could for what the customer requested. But there obviously had to be a way to track my performance since the manager wasn't always around. The company, just as the other careers I had, needed a grasp on how well I performed in relation to my hourly wages. It's a simple concept: I meet the numbers I'm expecting, and the company gives incentives and rewards. Or execute disciplinary action if my performance is poor. Now, I may be the only one with this opinion, but it's my least favorite part of my job, any job really. Now, I'll try my best not to bash the system, as it's what is used in many white-collar jobs and maybe even more than I know. As most of you know, most of my life in the workforce was in retail. And when I mention retail, I'll be including my salesman career along with this subject. I do believe that's still technically considered retail. Now, as I've mentioned, I'm just recapping my knowledge on who all were graded by numbers. Let's cover some retail numbers. Speaking on the amount spent with clients, or how many needed to be assisted. Most of my jobs granted a time limit on helping customers. Except at the dealership, management didn't care if you spent the entire day, only that they were expecting a car to be sold. Anyways, the expected amount of time spent per client was more of a recommendation than an actual requirement, as situations were different per customer, regardless if it was a sale or an issue brought up by the customer. Now for the actual numbers. For both Radio Shack and Best Buy, the most common metrics were warranties sold, phones sold, customer surveys, and of course, a recap on attendance. For those job positions, phones generated revenue by getting a kickback from the carrier. If an upgrade, new line, or new account were made, then the retail store would get paid on the back end by the postpaid provider. Let's say a phone is $1,000 and it were to be purchased straight up cash. Well, then the store would break even and even possibly hurt their profits. And here's why: retail stores don't profit much from direct transactions since they pretty much pay full price for the phone, though they may get a very slight discount from buying bulk. Let's say smartphones purchased from Apple or Samsung. There's not much of a price margin if sold upright to a customer. The cell phone carriers then pay the retailer for creating new contracts. I know the term contract isn't really used, but if you analyze the paperwork, there's still an agreement, and you still have a certain time period for returns and cancellations. Then how would the retail store benefit from selling phones, you may ask? Here are the answers. There's the kickback from the carrier, as I mentioned before, and also other forms of income. From insurance, to cell phone accessories, and a big one, bringing you, the customer, into the store and opening up an opportunity that you'd purchase other products. That extra charger you paid $12 only cost the retail store $3 to make. Laptops would be another example. Profits from selling just the computer would be minimal, but then the real profit comes in once insurance is purchased, additional software, a laptop case, and pretty much any attachment. And while you're at the store, why not take a peek around and see what else you might need? Maybe there's a good sale on drones or surround sound systems. You've now stepped into retail, a place that has mastered advertising. Now, most of what I've covered was in regards to the stores that work with consumer products, but I have a feeling that you, the listener, Have a number system that tracks your performance by management. And that's the key word. If you own your own business or simply just happen to work at a job in which performance isn't recorded, then that's one less thing to worry about. I didn't want to keep the talk too long, so maybe I'll cover how the numbers worked for my past job at the dealership. But anyways, thank you for staying tuned as I close this book. See you in the next chapter.